going here.
Fit show this week, and Myron had never even heard of this. And I think it's true that many people haven't heard of this. They don't just believe in the written Torah. That's what they call it. There's the Torah, which is the scripture. This is the revelation by God. They believe in what's written there, but they also believe in an oral Torah that's not written down. It's something that's transferred over the generations orally. That is until it was written down in the Babylonian Talmud in the beginning of the first millennium. And I want to just read you a few quotes from this Jewish Talmud. And in case you don't know, this is the holy book, their number one holy book, which they have believed in for thousands of years. This is the basis of Talmudic rabbinical Judaism.
Okay,
and I know because I looked at this list of quotes that's been circulating on the internet, and I just spout it. I just say it, even though I obviously didn't even bother to look up any of these sources, or I would have spotted the ones that are completely made up. But I don't even know that. But I'm the expert telling you that we need to prepare for holy war.
There's already so much to analyze here and to debunk here. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, the one thing is that the Talmud is not the basis. It's the Tanakh, the Old Testament. It's the Tanakh is the basis of their faith. And the Talmud is commentary. It's dialogue between different rabbis. They don't take everything in it as gospel because it's debate going on. So there's contradictory statements in the Talmud.
And you can't take everything as a command because they contradict you. The rabbis contradict each other over and over and over again. It'll say, this rabbi says this, and then this rabbi will respond and say, no, you're getting it wrong because of this. But then they will just go to the quotation by that first rabbi and then say, see, this is the command that all Jews are following in secret.
Yeah, it's pretty pathetic.
This is how they interpret the 613 commandments that are laid out in the written Torah. This is their application by the rabbis over thousands of years. And up until just recently, they all believe this, despite there maybe being atheist Jews today. These are a handful of selected quotes. Even the best of the Gentiles should be killed.
Wrong.
Nope, not accurate at all.
I looked that one up too.
Yep, go ahead. You go first.
You want me to break it down? Okay, so I was reading that it's basically someone who is familiar with the Talmud. When they see Rabbi so-and-so said this, they're familiar with Rabbi so-and-so's positions and his commentaries and what this is all connected to. And so they understand it. This guy just goes completely massacres the context and says, you see, it makes it sound. Notice, how did that sound according to the way he just presented it? Even the best of the Gentiles should be killed. So this is talking about Gentiles in general. Even the best of us should be killed. When you go in context, this to the wider context of this rabbi's position, it starts with a commentary on the Exodus. Right?
Yes.
So you got that too, right? So there you got the independent confirmation here. So it's he's commenting on the Exodus, right? And he's talking about the Egyptians when they came out in their chariots. And so the discussion among the rabbis was, hey, wait a minute, didn't God strike their animals? Didn't God strike their animals? And yet they're charging out in chariots against the Jews. And so they reasoned, wait a minute, God must have only been punishing the really evil ones. And the others were not punished. Therefore, they're the ones who had animals. Okay, so guess what? Who are these people coming at us with their horses? Those are the good guys of the Egyptians who weren't hell-bent on rebelling against God, but they're still coming out against us because they're part of the army and they're told to come out against us. So they reasoned, wait a minute, these are guys who are not under God's punishment, and yet they're coming out against us. And so what do we do in these situations? The reasoning is, in a war, there are actually good people on the other side. There are people who aren't in rebellion against God or anything else, and there are really evil people. What do you do? And it's going to look, even the best of them, kill them. So if you're in a war, you can't make those kinds of decisions. Oh, he looks like a nice guy. Even the best of them, you fight. That's what I got, and that's the greater context of that command. Very, very different from the way he portrays it. But what were you seeing, IP?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. It's in Sofrim 15:10 is where this actually is, and does it have commentary on the Exodus? And it's exactly what you said. It's about killing in war. If these people are attacking like when, you know, the slaves, the Hebrew slaves are running away and these people are chasing them in chariots. Yeah, you got to kill them to defend yourselves. It's not you do this all the time. This is about an act of war. And, you know, like there's other passages like Tosefta, Sanhedrin 13, the righteous of all nations have a share in the world to come. So like you have things like that in the Talmud as well, where it's actually talking highly of the Gentiles, that they will have a share in the world to come. So, I mean, like the idea that you can just sort of cherry pick these places out. But this is how bad Fuentes is his research. He didn't actually look at the Talmud like you and I did. It took us like 15 minutes probably. And that's how long it took me to find this. He just found this list online, went with it because he knew it would rile up his supporters to get him in his holy war. That's what he's really about here.
And look at his followers. You can tell his followers, they do not care even slightly. No. And some are even saying, oh, that's like when Muslims say it's talking about what? No, it's literally talking about war. They're talking about an army marching out against you. And the idea that not everyone in an opposing army is some horrible, evil person. Some people are just in the army. That's their job. And so they're following their orders to come and fight you. What do? That's the actual context. Nick just left all of that out. Now, suppose you were trying to come to an informed decision about what you should think about the Talmud. Do you think it might be relevant to point out this is not saying that Jews need to kill all Gentiles, even the best of them? This is saying that in a context where you're fighting, there are not the people who are coming at you are not necessarily all evil, horrible oppressors. Because notice the reasoning that the rabbi who said this was using was God did not punish them. That's why they still had their animals. So God wasn't punishing them. So they were not among the people that God himself was punishing, which means they're not in the same category with the people that God was punishing. They're in a different category. How are we going to be punishing people, fighting people that God let slide?
Yeah.
There's also one fundamental difference here for those who say this is just like when Muslims say it's out of context. There is a huge difference between the Talmud and the Quran when it comes to their nature and their purpose. David and I, or Michael, would never sit down and actually criticize the Quran by giving a little quote from the Quran completely out of context and say, look, it says here, kill all of them. Therefore, the Muslims are supposed to kill everyone who is not a Muslim. We wouldn't even do that. But the major difference here is also the Quran is a book which was supposedly by the Islamic religion revealed by Allah and revealed as a direct message and a direct instruction for all Muslims to follow. So everything that it says, everything that it directly commands therein is a command to Muslims, and Muslims are supposed to follow that book word for word. The Talmud in that way is completely different. The Talmud is known to have been written down by the scholars. And the Talmud is not the direct word of God. The Talmud is not a collective of commands. The Talmud is mostly made up of discussions of scholars contradicting with each other because they are debating something, or of interpretations of the law. So you can find tons of quotes in there that if you take them at face value, you can't even follow them because two lines after each other completely contradict each other. That is not possible. That the Talmud is supposed to be studied in order to understand Jewish history, Jewish thinking, Jewish interpretation of the law, and so on. It is not meant to be a book that you follow word for word directly. So there's a huge difference there. You should understand that at first.
Yeah, let me just give a quick two quick quotations here to illustrate this in a different way. This is a quote from the Talmud. The righteous of all nations have a share in the world to come. Yeah. The righteous of all nations have a share in the world to come.
How is this possible?
Another quote. I call heaven and earth as witnesses. Any individual, whether Gentile or Jew, man or woman, servant or maid, can bring the divine presence upon himself in accordance with his deeds. Now, notice that's in the Talmud. That's in the Talmud. So how does that line up with the quotations that Nick is going to be giving here? Guess what? It's a bunch of quotes from a bunch of different rabbis. That's what it is. You can unless you have some basis for thinking, oh, when a Jew goes to the Talmud, he's only going to pick these particular quotations from these like really, really hardline rabbis who were really enraged because of stuff was going on, and ignore everything else that goes against that understanding. That's how we're going to do it. And he's acting like all Jews, except for the ones that are now atheists, are on the same page there. And guys, even just saying that's how he's representing things. Doesn't that sound like really, really evil and slimy?
Yeah, very much is. And yeah, let's play the next line and we'll comment on it as well.
The Talmud. All children of the Gentiles are animals.
This is so ridiculous.
I looked that one up too.
Yeah, I didn't find anything like that. What about you, David?
Yeah, I did find the context was completely different. They're talking about laws about who a son is allowed to marry from the relatives of his father, like his father's brothers, ex-wife, and so on, things that are forbidden. And they're talking about things like levirate marriage and so on. So they're talking about they're talking about different relations that you're allowed to have. And then the comment about the Gentiles was they don't have this patrilineage thing where the father is in this certain sort of relation, and therefore all these different relations with relatives of the father are forbidden according to the law. They're saying they don't have that. They don't have the patrilineage, and therefore a Gentile doesn't have that kind of relationship with these other people, and therefore it's similar to like an animal. Like if a horse has an offspring, you don't say, well, this horse has to be kept separate from these other things there. So you might say, I don't like that and stuff, but the way he's presenting it is, Gentiles aren't humans; they're beasts, or the children of Gentiles are animals and things like that. Wait, which one was I responding to? Those are two separate passages.
It's Yevamot 98a.
98a. Yeah, 98a.
What it says here, basically word for word, is, and this here is the issue. These are old memes. He's repeating them. These are not actual quotes that he takes from the Talmud. These are just something that somebody wrote, which are claimed to be said in the Talmud. What the Talmud says here is, learn from this that the merciful one dispossesses the male Gentile of his offspring, as it is written with regard to Egyptians, whose flesh is the flesh of donkeys and whose semen is the semen of horses. Ezekiel 23:20, i.e., the offspring of a male Gentile is considered no more related to him than the offspring of donkeys and horses. So, what this does not, if you read this, mean that they are animals.
It's saying if you do not have this law, if you are not part of this patrilineage law, then it's just a biological relationship, and you don't have, the offspring of horses, you don't have all these rules to follow, and neither do Gentiles.
Yeah,
that's what it looks like to me. But the point is, so you could look at that and you say, I don't like that. I don't like being compared to animals or something like that. The point is, when Nick and his groypers, when they quote this, they make it sound like saying, you're just animals we can slaughter at will. That has nothing to do with the passage. That has zero to do with the passage. This is talking about who are you allowed to marry? Like if your father's brother had a wife and then they divorced, would you as a Gentile be allowed to marry her? According to the Jews, you wouldn't be allowed to marry her if you're under the law. If you're a Gentile, you don't have that. You don't have that rule. So I don't know. Again, you could say, "Hey, I don't like the comparison," saying that it's more like the animals or something like that. But is this? Did he accurately represent what this passage is about? No, and I'm not aware of him. I'm not aware of him. I mean, guys, there are messed up things in the Talmud. Yeah. There are clearly messed up things that we would look at. And matter of fact, I've seen this from Jews. I've seen from Jews saying, "Hey, there are sections in here where we Jews will look at that and go, whoa!" And that's why they're encouraging careful study and actually look at the ongoing debate and so on. But this guy, Nick Fuentes, is he quoting anything and representing it accurately? I have not seen him quote anything that he is representing accurately once you actually go to the passage. And guys, that's if that doesn't bother you, groypers, then you just don't care. And in which case, stop acting like you are the champions of truth and justice in the world. You're rallying around a deceiver who's trying to lie to people to get them to go fight Jews.
This is one very interesting thing to point out, in my opinion, as somebody who is not a Christian and who doesn't have a horse in this race. I would like to point out that
see, you're like a horse. You see,
if a supposed Christian nationalist, which is a modern code for fascist, has a problem with the comparison that is being made here in the Talmud, which is not meant to indicate that Gentiles are animals, then David and Michael enlighten me about doesn't Jesus in the Gospels also make a comparison between animals and another being like
the Bible says those things about just
dog.
sinners in general. Calls us beasts and stuff like
so,
this. And
doesn't Jesus say in Matthew giving the food to the dog?
So you're thinking of the woman
he healed her daughter.
Jesus goes to Tyre and Sidon to get like a break or something, and a Canaanite woman is coming up.
There's a Canaanite woman.
Heal my daughter. And he goes, it's not right for me to give the food that belongs to the children to the little dog. Now, people get offended when they hear that. They don't realize the term Jesus is using is not a derogatory term.
Whoa,
Jesus
says all non-Christians are animals and they are dogs. Look at this.
Yeah, it's an analogy. And the term he uses is not even a derogatory term. It refers to like a very pampered house pet, if I recall. And so basically he's making an analogy, and then, in the same gospel, Matthew, at the end, he says, now that everything has been fulfilled, I've resurrected, there's atonement. Now you can be the light to the nations. Now take the gospel to all the nations, which is what Israel was supposed to do. Jesus in his ministry is working with Israel because he's setting them up to be the church to take the gospel to the nations. This is why at this point with the Canaanite woman, he says it's not right for me to do this yet. He does it anyway, though, because he's a merciful God. But he's basically saying, look, right now he's setting up the whole ministry of Israel being the light to the nations. This is what the early church was. They were all Jews. And that's kind of what's set up, and that's how it ends in the Gospel of Matthew. Now we take this to the whole nation. So that's generally the whole historical framework of that whole story. Yeah. All right, let's hear the next lie from Fuentes.
Gentiles are not human; they're beasts. A Jew.
Wow.
No, not in there.
Wrong.
That is horribly taken out of, horribly misrepresented. Yeah. It's not even there. I'm not saying taken out of context. It's not even there.
Yeah, I found the passage, the closest passage.
Bava Metza 114.
The closest passage to that was talking about graves, and the question was, how is this? Was he a priest or something like that? It's like, how is this guy standing in the Gentile graveyard? And that should make him unclean. Why is he going there if it's something that will make him unclean? And the defense of that guy from a rabbi was that because God says to the Jews, you are my people, you are the sheep of my pasture. Therefore, they're not in the same group with you, and therefore their dead bodies don't make you unclean.
Yeah.
So they're not the same category. So you could say, hey, we're in different categories here, and you could even he says something strong like they're not people or something like that, or they're not in a whatever it is. So you can say that, but this is not in the context of like killing people and stuff. It's like, does one group's bones make you unclean versus another group's bones making you unclean?
Let me just read from it. This is Bava Metzia 114b too. So he says, this is what it says. As it is taught, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehoai, I'm probably butchering that, says the graves of Gentiles do not render one impure.
By the way, that's the extreme hardline guy that they keep quoting.
Yeah. And you, my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, are man, which teaches that you, i.e., the Jewish people, are called man, but Gentiles are not called man, since the Torah states with regard to ritual impurity imparted in a tent, if a man dies in a tent, evidently impurity imparted by the tent does not apply to Gentiles. So actually what it's doing is it's taking the word from Ezekiel 34:31, and you, my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, are man. It says, look, that phrase, are man, that's referring to the Jews the men in that are not the Gentiles in that basic passage. So the men are, it's not encompassing Gentiles in that quote we're getting from Ezekiel. So again, he's taking it wildly out of context. I doubt Fuentes has even looked this up.
He didn't look at it. Let me make it very simple. Ezekiel 34:31 says, "As for you, my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, you are mankind, and I am your God, declares the Lord God." The rabbi here in this part of the Talmud simply cites Ezekiel 34:31, and then says, "This here is evidence that when it talks about man, it is referring to Jews, not to non-Jews.
Yes, exactly.
And so the law refers to the Jews, not to non-Jews. That's all it is saying. But then here comes the neo-Nazi and it's like, you see, it says we are not human beings, we are animals.
And by the way, there's a reason for him to be pointing that out, that rabbi to be pointing that out, because you see this over and over again among the rabbis, that one of them will quote and say, hey, this does not say children of Israel here. This just says man. This just says man here. And therefore, this would apply. This is something that would apply to everyone. Like when it's, I don't even think he has it here, but one of the common quotations is, if a Gentile learns the law, he should be killed, right? You look at it, and one of the rabbis is saying the reason he should be killed. Keep in mind, they're not giving actual death sentences here. The rabbis had no authority to issue a death sentence that was not for something that is explicitly mentioned in the Torah. They would just say, this guy deserves death. This guy deserves death for this. But the reasoning was, if the law was given to the Jews, and the Jews so therefore have the law, and you come and take it, it's like you're committing robbery or adultery, and therefore you deserve death. Notice that was a rabbi saying that. Another rabbi said, no. If a Gentile learns the law, he's like our high priest. And it says, it says the man who does these things shall live by them. So notice, and they point out, they say there it says man, a man who lives by them. It doesn't say a Levite or a descendant of Israel. It doesn't say any of that. It just says the man who lives by them. Therefore, Gentiles are allowed to learn the law, and they should be respected for it. So those are the things you have. But notice what the response to the hardline approach was, hey, it says man here. It doesn't just say a Jew or something like that. So that's why he's pointing out that in Ezekiel, even though it says man, God is clearly talking to the children of Israel. So he's sort of flipping this method on them, saying, okay, even though it says man, here in this context, we see it's specifically referring to Jews. It says, therefore, the law only applies there. But yes, you don't get this. If you actually read the passage in context, you're not getting Gentiles are not humans, they're beasts, and therefore you could just slaughter them however you want. It's a massive misrepresentation of even what the rabbi is saying. Even let alone that this is the position of the entire Talmud, and this is what all non-atheist Jews go by.
The next quote will be even worse.
It is. Yeah. This next one is even worse.
May violate but not marry a non-Jewish girl.
You want to play that again?
Yeah, play it again.
Let me go back a little bit.
Play it again, Sam. Hey, you groypers, give us the source on this. We want to look this one up, but we can't find it anywhere in the Talmud.
Gentiles are not human, they're beasts.
Okay, next one.
A Jew may violate but not marry a non-Jewish girl.
A Jew may violate but not marry a non-Jewish girl. Groypers, give us the source on that one.
So if you look it up online, it's God Shosh 2.2. That's not an abbreviation of any of the tractates in the Talmud. It's
not an actual source.
It doesn't exist. The question was asked to many rabbis as well. And so Shas is a term that can be used for the Talmud in general. And God is, simply from the Torah. There is no book anywhere that is called God or that is called God Shas belonging to the Talmud. This source is entirely made up. It does not exist. It never did exist. So, and this is a huge example of Nick Fuentes simply taking these online memes. I have the image in front of me, like 2 forms of them right now, where these things are listed. He takes that very same thing and just lists these supposed quotes without fact checking them. Or maybe he did fact check them. Maybe he knows it doesn't exist, but he doesn't care because all he needs to do is to rile people up against the Jews. So, dear Nazis, why does your hero here lie? Why does he blatantly lie?
That's the big problem.
If he's not lying, where's the source here?
Yeah, give us the source, guys. We're talking to all you hundreds of you groypers there cheering for Nick right now. He just gave you a quotation. We're asking for the source because we all tried to look it up, and it's all from a made-up source. That it's not the Talmud. It doesn't exist in there. At least we couldn't find it. So if you actually have looked into this, you're the experts. We're kind of new to this. So if you are the authorities and you trust this guy, give us the source. Now, if you try to look it up and you can't find it, and you find out it's a fabricated source, you only got two options. Either Nick is completely ignorant. He has no clue what he's talking about, and he's actually calling. He's actually calling for some massive intolerance towards Jews based on these things he's quoted. So either he has no clue, he just looked at a list that he saw on Twitter one day and just went with it and didn't bother to look up anything. In which case, you should not be listening to him about people you're supposed to eventually be waging war against. Or two, as AP pointed out, the other option is he does know and he knows he's lying. So you're dealing with someone who is completely ignorant or a liar. He's ignorant, in which case you shouldn't be listening to him, or he's a liar, in which case you shouldn't be listening to him. But I have a strange feeling because of the cult tactics that are going on with groups these days, that what we just showed you is not going to bother you even slightly. It's not going to cause any sort of concern for you. Why? Because you just don't care. It's not about actual evidence and him being accurate with the information he's presenting. You hate Jews, he hates Jews. Therefore, let's all just pretend that this is what the Talmud says, and you just don't care. In which case, great. We don't need to listen to
two options, but there is always option number 3, which will be the popular choice. Since the source does not exist, it must mean that the Jews erased it.
You see,
they hid it. They got rid of it.
Isn't that funny? If you're deep enough into the conspiracy theories, right, you could say that. Like, hey, Nick Fuentes says this is in the Talmud. I can't find that in the Talmud. That's because the Jews covered it up and hid it from the Talmud. Well, how does this guy have access to it?
Where's the secret Talmud tractate? I love to see it, Groypers, but I mean, yeah. All right, let's get to the next one here.
I want to say one very quick thing. I don't want to pause too much, but a lot of people who are supporters of Nick Fuentes, or even others, say, why would you defend the Talmud? Why would you defend Jews? Why would you defend Judaism? I just want to say one quick thing. The purpose here is not to defend Jews or to defend Judaism or to do any of that stuff, primarily. Not. The main purpose here is to counter some incredibly ignorant, primitive, idiotic movement and its attempts to hijack public religious and socio-political sentiments in order to establish an ideological movement that is entirely based on hate, an ideological movement that is meant to separate people by races and oppress people by their religious affiliations and origins. We are here to simply correct that and to expose how that movement, led by people like Nick Fuentes, is built on lies. That's the point.
And I will add, the thing is that, again, there's a lot of young men who have been disenfranchised in this country, and they have flocked to Fuentes because the pendulum sometimes swings too far to the other side. And hopefully some of them realize they're being lied to and manipulated to become hateful, anti-Christian folk that just go after people for their race. And I want to stop that as much as possible. So, yeah, I'm very happy to go out and to defend the Jewish people when this kind of stuff comes out, because as a Christian, I'm called to love all people, pray for my enemies, and help the weak, help those that are being attacked and hated. Of course, I would go after this horrible kind of stuff. This is actually very much in line with our Christian history. I mean, look at during the plague of the 1300s, the Pope was protecting the Jews as they were being attacked by random crazy peasant Europeans. The Pope during World War II, very anti-Hitler, gave basically the seal they could kill Hitler because it would have been a righteous act to kill this nut job. There's a great book called Church of Spies, which points out that the Pope was trying to actively assassinate Hitler. So for all you Catholics out there that think that, your religion is all for being anti-Jewish, you guys should really read up on your history here. Read the book Church of Spies. You might learn something. So let's get to this next one here.
I think that means they can rape. So they can rape our women, just can't marry them.
Yeah, in this imaginary made-up source.
Women are in a state of filth.
Just pause it right there, because I mean, I don't. I don't think people really understand how messed up this is. This is a guy who has a bunch of stupid young followers going, oh, we're groypers. And he's telling them their book says they can rape your women. It says it. And these guys are too stupid to actually say, you know what, before we run around saying this, let's actually look this up. Let's verify it. Let's verify it by going to the source. Because if you went to it, you find out there is no source. It's a made up source. To
only a Jew would look it up.
Yeah. And so this is the concern, guys, that everyone who's watching this is going, wow, that's really messed up that the Talmud says that. How does it never cross anyone's mind to look this stuff up? Because it doesn't. I haven't seen one of his fans saying, you know, guys, after he said it, I looked it up and it's not in there. So maybe we need to rethink what we're accepting from this guy. Doesn't seem to bother him. But that's what's going on around the world right now. People nervous about something that's going on in society. They rally around some guy who's attacking the group that they're worried about. And then this guy starts leading him in a very dangerous path. And he becomes unquestionable. You cannot question him. You have to mindlessly accept everything that he says. You cannot question. And anyway, this is
so for any Daniel Hakikachu fans watching, it's called Googling. You go and you Google it. It's research. That's what you do when someone makes a claim. You go and you fact check it. That's what you're supposed to do.
You could even read the abstract, but under no circumstances do you read the entire article.
No, never.
So they can rape our women, just can't marry them. Gentile women are in a state of filth from the time they're born.
Nope, doesn't say that.
There is actually a source that says something. It's it means impurity, like spiritual impurity.
Ritual impurity. Yeah.
And so it's like the sort of ritual impurity that you would get from menstruation and so on. But the context of that passage, and again, guys, it did not take us long to look up all these things that he's been quoting for years and have been quoted for a century. And no one ever bothers to look them up. Until us? Like, we're the first people to say, hey, let's actually go to the Talmud and look these passages up. But in the context, it's talking about why food that's prepared by Gentiles should not be consumed by Jews. So we're familiar with that. That was a big discussion in the Bible as far as Jews and Gentiles eating together. It became a big issue in the early church. Like, hey, because the Gentiles are becoming Christians now, is it okay for us to actually eat? That became a little dispute when Peter, went over to the Jewish table and didn't eat with the Gentiles. And then Paul calls him out. It's like, hey, you can't do that. So that's an issue even there. But the context of this passage is why is the food of the Gentiles unclean? And they give a bunch of possible explanations from the rabbis. One of the rabbis says this: it's because they don't have the law and they're in a state of perpetual spiritual uncleanness. And some of the other options was because you don't, which you see from the Apostle Paul when he's discussing it. So he's familiar with these issues as well. They're just saying, okay, well, you don't know what they've blessed with idol worship and stuff like this. So you don't want to be eating some of their food that they've dedicated to idols or something like that. Anyway, it gives different ideas about why you don't eat the food of the Gentiles. How does this get represented? Gentile women are in a state of filth from the time they were born. And all Jews believe that. All Jews who aren't atheists believe this. That's Nick's position, and it's a rabbi giving that as an explanation for why you don't eat.
One rabbi.
It even gives examples of, if you read the English on Sepharia.org, you can see it talks explicitly about a Gentile child imparts ritual impurity, and then it describes what to do and what to know about ritual impurity. It says ritual impurity. It literally says that because that is what is being discussed here. But if you want to take impurity and want to go to different sources, I know some Muslims brought up these lists as well and said, look what the Talmud says about Gentiles. David, you know very well in Quran chapter 9 verse 28 it says that the polytheists are impure, right? It says they shall not come to
they're najis, they're filthy.
They're najis, they're filthy. Don't let them approach the masjid. So this is not even comparable to that.
Yeah, it's talking about ritual purity, guys. And so again, just look it up in the actual Talmud. I believe the actual source on this one is Avada Zara 22 is where you actually go and read this. So some of the Groypers, why don't you go read this stuff? I mean, like, if you think Jews are actually your enemy, why don't you actually read their playbook? I mean, I've read large sections of the Talmud. I don't agree with everything I see in there. There's a lot of problems, and even Jews will acknowledge that. But you guys don't even know what it says. So
I think it's actually Avodah Zarah 36b, what has been referred to here.
Okay, you might be right, yeah. All right, let's hear. I think we have 2 more of these clips to go through.
If a Gentile hits a Jew, he must be killed. But when a Jew murders a Gentile, there will be no death penalty. So it's a little double standard.
This might be one of the most complicated to actually understand and explain.
Yeah. I only looked up the first part there because by that time I was like, seeing him actually quote completely made up sources and so on, and everything else is out of context. I was like, okay, I don't really need to look the rest of these up. But
it shows up in a list of a bunch of different rabbis' opinions, and then you read the later rabbis. So they come after. It's at Sanhedrin 58. You read like the first one, I believe it's in 18, and it says like, if a Gentile hits a Jew, he should be killed because this is the representatives of God. These are like,
and it specifically refers to it refers to Moses, right? Like Moses, Moses saw the Egyptian beating a Jew, and he killed the man. So they say, okay, but there you go.
If you read past it, like 21, 22, it's other rabbis' opinions saying that these are different opinions. So like Rabbi Hania, one who raises his hand to strike another is called a sinner, as it is stated. And the priest lad would come and would say to him, but you shall give now, and if not, I will take by force. Rabbi Huna says his hand should be cut off, as it is stated. This is talking about people in general, mind you. Rabbi Elazar says such a violent person has no remedy but burial, as it is stated, as a mighty man who has earth. The expression literally means a man of an arm. So yet anyone, generally speaking, in the verse is interpreted to mean that one habitually strikes others deserve to be buried. So you're getting, it's in a list of a bunch of different rabbis' opinions here. So you get contradictory statements here, and they're not pointing that out.
And by the way, I mean, it's like if you look at the Groypers in the chat, I mean, the level of stupidity rivals any of like the Hikikachu fans or anything like that. I mean, it's that bad. I mean, think about this, guys. Nick Fuentes says, the Talmud says this. We point out that it's a made-up source. It does not exist. It is not in the Talmud. And they, lol, defending the Talmud, lol, take the L, defending the Talmud. Like, wait. Notice what they actually believe in their showing. They actually believe someone on their side can completely fabricate something. I mean, they could just come out and say, hey, did you know that in the Talmud it says... beat the apostate prophet senseless every day and torture him for fun and grab little puppies and just beat them and torture and knock old ladies off bridges. And you can just make anything up. And if we say, guys, can you actually give us a ref? Can you actually show us that?
Why are you defending the Talmud?
Oh my goodness, he's defending it. Hello, so stupid, so stupid. Yeah, we're the stupid ones for actually reading sources, looking up sources. That makes us dumb. You guys, the guys who mindlessly accept anything some idiot Hitler wannabe says, you're the champions of reason and truth and justice in the world. Just saying it sounds stupid.
I'm not going to say the Talmud is perfect. I mean, there's a section in the Talmud where it says, don't leave your animals with Gentiles because they might commit bestiality. Like, that's one rabbi's opinion. It's horrible. I completely point that out for being horrible. I know Jews will point that out for being horrible. And again, it's one opinion of one of these bad rabbis that they don't take as gospel. Sure, you can find bad stuff in there. But notice how easy it is for me to find something that's actually in the Talmud, and Nick has got to make things up. Like, it's just horrible reasoning.
Yeah, and it is. And I mean, the entire, even if you didn't focus on individual quotations, which are often made up, completely fabricated, just the entire picture he's given. These are the list of things. This is what their book says, and they believe in this. Just stating what this actually is, that it's recording an ongoing debate about how to act. And this rabbi said this. Oh, this rabbi said the opposite. This later rabbi came up and went in with a middle position and so on. Mm-hmm. And is he at all? I mean, is he even in the ballpark of representing any of this accurately? No. And his fans do not care. This is guys. This is a classic example of cult tactics in action.
So this last
only,
quote
only
is
Jews do fact checking. Only Jews look things up.
You fact check, you're a Jew. You're a Jew.
this last line is apparently on lying, and I looked this one up, and again, he's taking this one wildly out of context. But let's play this one.
They kill us, no problem. We kill them or hit them, you die instantly. Those are the rules. And then this is the best part, because I know they'll come in and clarify, and a lot of them want to run interference. They say, no, you just don't understand. That's not actually what it means. You're just interpreting it wrong.
And that's a made-up source.
It's a made-up source, dude.
It's a made-up source.
But this is the last part, and this is my favorite part. It says this: Jews may use lies to circumvent the Gentiles.
Oh,
Ooh.
does it now, Nikki? Does it, Nikki?
Where's the source? Can you just tell me what exactly it says? Can you quote it? Like, can you do the very same thing?
And I don't know, because I told you I already gave up looking up these sources after he was 0 for 8.
Can you imagine if we did this, David? Can you imagine if our criticism of Islam consisted of just going on a stage or going live and saying the Quran says kill all the disbelievers, the Quran says you can rape them, the Quran says this and that, and we never give sources? Can you imagine?
Or even more extreme, AP, if we went through the entire history of debates of Muslim sheikhs over their understanding, and we quoted Muslim sheikhs who said something at some point that's really, really bad, that is not found in the actual Quran or from Muhammad. It's just something that some sheikh said at some point, and other sheikhs contradicted him and quoted the sources that show that he's wrong and so on. But we just quote that sheikh and say, you see, this is the official position of Islam, and all Muslims believe this. We wouldn't do it, because we're not like, I mean, what actually happens in discussions? We say, oh, look, it says right here, fight those who do not believe in Allah and so on. And Muslims say, oh, you're taking that out of context. We say, let's read the context. Let's actually go to the source, because we're not making up the source. Let's read it in context. Why do we quote the Muslim scholars and so on? To show that, for 14 centuries, they all interpret this in one standard way. And it's not until you get to the modern age where they start interpreting things differently. So we actually go through, we quote the Muslim sources, and then we examine the context. We examine what their greatest scholars and so on say. That's like the opposite of what this dude's doing. I mean, one, just completely made up sources some of the time. Other times, just like if you actually understood what the Talmud is, you would not be acting like, Jews walk around with this list of commands in their pockets about how they're going to, kill all Gentiles and so on. This is the takeaway. This is the takeaway of the Talmud. I mean, it's just guys. I mean, I knew nothing about this guy until very recently when he was there with
Sneeko.
And then before that, I saw him with Kanye. Didn't know anything about him before that. No. But it's like I'm looking at this going, I would not trust this guy with anything, let alone to be a leader of a movement. This guy's a freaking liar.
Hey, speaking of Kanye, what's funny? I'm sorry, IPU, you keep wanting to talk, and I want to get
I'm going to read the actual Talmudic source here.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Yeah, the thing about Kanye, which is very funny. I know this is petty right now, but I just want to be petty for a second. Nick Fuentes went on Just Pearly Things channel and gave an interview there, and he was acting very cool, and he was bragging about Kanye. Because Kanye fired everyone who was ever around him, and he didn't like Milo. He fired Milo and all of that, and then he brags and he's like, but not me. He loves me. He loves me. He wouldn't fire me. And then, not much later, Nick Fuentes got fired by Kanye.
Love it. So
it's so ridiculous.
So here's the actual Talmudic source. It's Bava Kama 1 BAVA KA MMA 113A. So I'll read the full context. Rav Ashi said the Mishnah issues its ruling with regard to a Gentile customs collector. So specifically a customs collector, whom one may deceive as it is taught in the case of a Jew and a Gentile who approach the court for judgment in a legal dispute. If you can vindicate the Jew under Jewish law, vindicate him and say to the Gentile, this is our law. If he can be vindicated under Gentile law, vindicate him and say to the Gentile, this is your law. And if it is not possible to vindicate him under either system of law, one approaches the case circuitously, seeking a justification to vindicate the Jew. This is the statement of Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva disagrees and says, one does not approach the case in order to vindicate the Jew due to the sanctification of God's name, as God's name will be desecrated if the Jewish judge employs dishonest means. Okay, then it goes on to say, and even according to Rabbi Akiva, the reason that the court does not employ trickery in order to vindicate the Jew is only because there is a consideration of the sanctification of God's name. Consequently, if there is no consideration of the sanctification of God's name, the court does approach the case. Apparently, it is permitted to deceive a Gentile. So, in this really specific context, you have a customs collector trying to take something away from a Jew, which is considered sacred or something that is they are allowed to have according to their own law. Then you can use deception in that sort of case. That's the very specific thing. This is not saying you can just lie to Gentiles left and right. It specifically says you cannot lie to them if God's name is going to be desecrated. So, which would cover a whole lot of other things, especially if you're basing it on the Torah, for example, and the very specific verses in Leviticus where you cannot deceive, you cannot lie, you cannot bear false witness, these kinds of things. So it's only in this one very, very, very specific instance can you ever deceive. So that's the actual context. But Fuentes just takes that one line that he got off some list offline somewhere, takes it wildly out of context. The Talmud does not say you can just lie to Gentiles left and right. So this is just a blatant lie. Ironic.
That's exactly how you would take it if you're one of his fans and you heard him say it. You would take it as they can just lie all they want and just misrepresent everything and lie about what's in all their sources and so on. And it's not what is actually, and what's amazing. I mean, what's still amazing. Look at his fans in the chat. If you go to the context and you show it doesn't actually mean what he's representing it as meaning, you're the bad one. You're the bad one. The good person is the one who takes the quotation completely out of context or completely fabricated and made up, completely misrepresents what it is, completely misrepresents what the book is, and so on. Misrepresents basically every single level of what a passage means, and that makes you the good guy. That's the champion, and you need to build your life around him and be a good groiper. That's the definition of a good groiper.
Yeah, it's these brown shirts out here, they don't think, and that's what Nick wants. He doesn't want his followers to think. He wants you to fall in line so he can have you die in his holy war, which is very dangerous if you think about it. If that's the way you want to live. Okay, well, you can stand before God on Judgment Day and explain why you followed a moron when you were warned not to.